All right. Hello, my name's Caleb,
I'm Blair.
and welcome to Still to Be Decided. I'm thinking left in Perth now.
Yeah, let's do left in Perth. I like that.
That is better? Alright,
left
cool.
in Perth, because we are kind of like left in Perth.
We are left in Perth, but we're also being left in Perth. So
Yeah, we're just left here.
we're just left. Awesome. All right. Mate, cool. All right, let's move on. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, awesome.
So today we're going to be talking about the Scarborough Gas plan being ruled invalid by federal court, Dan Andrews' resignation more broadly in Australia, the writers' strike going on in the USA, and of course some other stuff. Thank you for listening. This is a political podcast with a focus of Western Australian and Australian politics more broadly. I think we already introduced ourselves.
Let's introduce ourselves a little bit more comprehensively, I reckon.
Yeah, why not?
Who are you, Caleb?
I'm Caleb. I'm a guy. I'm just here left in Perth, doing some recording because I've reached that age in my life where I metamorphose, one of those
Metamorphosed
metamorphosed into a podcaster. As
Good.
every man does at some point in his life, unfortunately.
Every white man gets a podcast eventually, and we are two of them. Hopefully ours is good.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone. And Blair, how about yourself?
So I'm a member of Socialist Alliance. I'm also a member of a workers' cooperative called Friendly Computers. I do a lot of activism around Perth and WA and all that stuff. I lived in Sydney for a long time. Did a lot of activism there. Got to see what the East Coast is like. Yeah, and so it's a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Politics is fun.
That was a much better introduction. It wasn't depressing and sad, so I like that. Let's get into the news.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So first up, we got Scarborough Gas's environmental plan has been ruled invalid in court.
Finally.
Which is pretty cool. So it had been approved and then a rejection or hearing was made in federal court by Raylene Cooper, a traditional owner in the area, and was found that she was not properly consulted, meaning that the environmental plan was void.
Yeah, it was just foisted on them, wasn't it? Like the company just kind of went ahead and didn't actually consult with the traditional owners of the land.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty from what I've heard and from what I've seen when I was up in Karratha, that seemed to have been a pretty common thing where it was a small subsection of the community who was consulted about all of this mining.
Whoever would rubber stamp it and just let the mining go ahead, basically.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool that it was actually heard and that it went through. That's pretty awesome, and I hope that sets more of a precedent for these kinds of hearings.
I think it should, because that's the way our legal system works. Now we've got a precedent for these companies being denied environmental assessment approval. And so we actually want, if there is to be mining, I think there should be absolutely proper and stringent, not only cultural and custodian, consultation, but it should actually respect nature and make sure that we are being sustainable with our mining, if such a thing is even possible.
Yeah, well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? But I guess, for those who might not know, Scarborough Gas is a proposed gas expansion up on the north coast of WA, up in Karratha. It's going to be Australia's biggest greenhouse gas producer in all of history, currently, etc. And this environmental plan was relating to gas exploration off the coast or offshore, I guess, where they would basically send off these explosions, I guess, or into the seafloor as a way to survey.
Yeah.
As a way to survey. So thankfully because of the lack in consultation, I guess is one way to phrase it, the plan got rejected indefinitely. So I imagine this will get back on track before long and they will be underway, but hopefully they can be delayed for longer. And ideally the whole project can be scrapped because we're not going to be producing any more greenhouse gas producing projects We should be transitioning away, and we're building the biggest one in Australia's history.
It's ridiculous.
Expanding it to be the biggest in Australia's history, sorry.
Yeah, look, I was involved in the Adani campaign as well over East, and we did a good job in just throwing as much muck on them as possible. You know, like we really, really need to be fighting for a sustainable and ecological future. And this sets a really good news story for throwing more muck on these mining companies to show that all they will care about is profit, and they don't actually care about the welfare and the benefits and the happiness of Australian people, specifically custodial owners of the land.
No, yeah, and the Adani project, has that been scrapped permanently, or is that sort of just indefinitely delayed, or it's sort of in this weird quagmire I've seen, right?
It's a huge quagmire. Like, it's gotten into, like, it probably won't ever go ahead, but not because of, like, official, sanction or anything, like, it won't, because we fought tooth and nail, like, even did occupations of banks and things and that sort of stuff. Like, we managed to get all the banks to turn away from it. I don't think they can get the funding
that
from
delayed
Australia.
for so long, and then there was that absolutely bizarre financial conspiracy almost by one of the head.
It was corruption, absolutely.
Finances from India. It was a whole weird thing. Look into that. I can't remember his name, but he ended up this supposed billionaire. It turns out his whole net worth was practically invented, which is why they were seeking so much investment from banks and the government in Australia.
That would have been a huge mine. Would have been one of the biggest mines in the world in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah. So it's good that one's been delayed, but I guess we'll see with the Scarborough Gas plant goes ahead. And for as well with this surveying off the coast, and more broadly with this gas expansion, the impacts that would have had on the whale migration routes there. Obviously, they communicate through sound, as we do when you're just setting off these massive explosions, because they're so sensitive to it. That effectively blinds them, and has been debatedly linked to whale beachings and things like that, due to submarines and just sonar in general. But yeah, so that's pretty awesome. That's been delayed indefinitely. Hopefully that stays delayed, and that project ends up in the same way that Adani is currently in.
Absolutely, yeah. We need to save our songlines.
Save our songlines. If you want to, we'll talk more about that at the end of the show. But of course, if you want to get involved in stopping the Burrup Hub and want to learn more, please check out Stop Burrup Hub on Facebook or Instagram. I think they have a TikTok as well.
Disrupt Burrup Hub,
Disrupt Burrup. Yeah, it's gone through so many. Anyway, Disrupt Burrup Hub. All right, all right,
DBH.
Cool. Yeah, check it out. It's a good project. They're making a lot of waves. It's been a bit since the cops, it's in recent memory, not the last 2 weeks anyway, that the cops did absolutely crazy stuff to a bunch of their members, with just pulling them over, holding them at gunpoint, and raiding their house.
With a SWAT team.
Yeah, like one of them got raided twice, I think. She was raided over conspiracy to commit a disruptive action. Not even to collect evidence for a crime that had been committed, but to get evidence because they believe that she was conspiring to commit another one.
Which is just ridiculous.
Which is insane.
Like, how can you predict someone's mental state, Like, the police have now, going after thought crimes.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. Is this Joanna Partika?
I think so, yeah. Well, this is the one that's been delayed to,
20th
of November, I think.
It's been delayed a bit. I know I had some comrades down at the magistrates court recently.
Yeah.
With all the drummers and it's a whole bunch of flags and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, she's getting some good support, which is good. But if
she needs all the support she can get.
I think that is a bit of a weird situation. I'm not sure if Australian law in general, because I don't know if that's ever been a situation where someone has been swatted over a conspiracy charge like that, which is why the delay, because the judge was like, I can't rule on this right now. I need to go. I need to go look into this because of the precedent it may set. But anyway, please check out all of that. Disrupt Burrup Hub. Need your support. They're doing awesome work.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anything else to say on this then?
I'd say stay across the news with respect to custodian battles against the mining companies. You can always find this stuff in the ABC News. It's really good. I still trust the ABC News on this issue. I think they're still pretty objective with respect to not necessarily forcing like Channel 7 and Channel 9, Channel 10, like the mining companies are helping Australia do everything, sort of bullshit.
I mean, they guess more critical of that then, but
Slightly
I
more
mean,
critical, I suppose. But they've been ABC have been pretty bad on some other things too. Yeah.
I mean, well, maybe we'll get into that in a bit. When in the next thing we're talking about Rio Tinto blast damages another rock shelter. Now this happened about a week ago, and it's been 3 years since Juukan Gorge. Blair, you mentioned to me there was another example of this.
This was the one. About.
Okay, cool.
This was the one we were both thinking of.
Okay, cool. So we were thinking about the same thing. So there was one. Thankfully, the entire rock shelter wasn't damaged. It seems to be culturally significant. But thankfully, it wasn't completely destroyed, unlike Juukan Gorge.
That's good to hear. I thought this was another total destruction.
No, it seems like there was an unexpected at the front of this rock shelter. Some of it fell down. Sorry, was damaged, and a tree, including that. But thankfully, the whole structure wasn't damaged.
Okay, good.
I'm not aware of any cultural artifacts that were damaged, even if the site itself was. Thankfully, they've paused the project. But I guess this just links to something I wanted to bring up was obviously 3 years since Juukan Gorge happened. From that, we saw a bunch of new cultural heritage laws being passed in Australia. And have you heard anything about that in Blair? How that got put in, and then 5 weeks later, something happened to it.
It's related to the whole state in WA, right? So not only were these cultural heritage laws brought in to try and protect cultural heritage and like a connection to the land, but when the media furor that the mining companies whipped up hit, suddenly Roger Cook, this supposed like more left-wing version of a Labor premier or whatever, just decided to repeal the laws, didn't he?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a weird situation because I had a look at these new laws. And I can kind of get, because a lot of the outrage over these new cultural heritage laws was from the farming lobby. And it seems that they were exempt from this stuff, but there was a lot of problems, whether or not this was manufactured, whether or not this was due to genuine concern, because these laws were mad confusing. So there was... I don't want to get too into it, because I went into a bit of a deep dive yesterday trying to understand what the hell these laws were about that were then repealed 5 weeks after being passed, and we went back to the 1972 laws with one or two amendments.
I mean, all I know is I'm a fan of degrowth. I think a lot less industrial production needs to be going ahead. I think the farming lobby, with whether or not their case for these laws being, undefined or very, grey, is an argument or not, I think their heart is not in the right place. The whole point of the farming lobby, forgive me for drawing myself on this question, is to make profit. We have some of the biggest big mining and farming in this state, and the whole point of farming is to make profit. It's not actually to feed people. It's a function of capitalism. So whether or not these laws were good or not, I think their repeal is a symbolic act on the part of the government to say that no, we're actually just going to let profit keep coming. Yeah. We're going to let industrial production ramp up. We're going to make sure that the land continue to be productive in a Western and imperialist way, and that's the way I see it. At least it's a very call me black and white on this issue, but the repeal of the laws is a symbolic loss for the left, I guess.
It definitely is a symbolic loss to just simply go back to the 1972 laws. Now, apparently there is some more well-constructed laws being thought out.
Good to hear.
But whether or not they stick, whether or not they end up being
highly controversial, etc.
Yeah, because they weren't popular among a significant segment of the First Nation community, because they didn't actually protect cultural heritage sites.
Right. Okay.
Well, they could have, but the minister for I can't remember a specific topic. One of the ministers that was in charge of this portfolio had the final say about these things in disputes.
Was that David Whitby? Reece Whitby, the environment minister, right? Would that be him?
It might have been the environmental minister, but I'm not for sure. But so anyway, farmers weren't happy about them being concerned that they couldn't dig a hole on their land because it might potentially damage a cultural heritage site, which is just insane. But like the laws were confusing, so maybe that was a source of genuine concern. And then those who are actually wanting to preserve cultural heritage sites were not happy because they didn't actually have the power to actually say no, these sites should, they're protected. Don't actually do that, when the minister can just say, yeah, no, we're gonna mine that now. It doesn't matter. So fingers crossed something better comes out. So Jukin Gorge doesn't have a repeat. Another rock shelter doesn't get blasted accidentally. Yeah, fingers crossed. I just wanted to bring up those cultural heritage laws because I think it's just insane that they got passed on put in effect on July 1st this year, 2023, and then 5 weeks later were repealed.
Yeah.
And we went back to the 1972 laws.
Back 50 years ago.
So it's just like... whatever. Because they were so atrociously constructed, these 2021 ones. But in any case,
I think the principle to uphold is that the environment is sacred, whether or not in a completely scientific and non-spiritual sense. From my perspective, and the environment is something we should be protecting, and our human connection to the land is more important than profit.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. That could be a slogan, maybe. In any case,
yeah, fuck yeah.
Anything else on yet another culturally significant site being blasted by a mining company, aka Rio Tinto?
No, I think we covered everything that was in the news. I have to check. I'd have to check
Is
the
that
other one.
all the news?
Because I think the rock shelter was the one that we were talking about.
Yeah. No, there was some confusion, sorry, about whether we were speaking about the same one, whether there was a second one a week and a half ago that we were but in any case, thankfully, it just seems like there was just one. But in any case,
still huge.
Moving on to the ABC article has informed us that there seems to be a crackdown on people sleeping in vans.
Yeah.
The horror. So anyway, the local government in Scarborough and the Freo area seems to be issuing a lot of move-on notices lately for people who are rough sleeping in tents or particularly in vans along the foreshore. Yeah. Often, it might be a lifestyle choice for some, but for many, especially with the rise in cost of living and rent specifically,
just general economic inflation.
Rising cost of living, whatever you want to call it. A lot of people have been turning to alternative ways to not be paying rent, including sleeping in a van. Yeah. A lot of them can be pretty comfy. Get to sleep near the beach, There can be showers available, thankfully, in Australia, with us being a pretty nice beach. Country or state,
cultural type place, yeah.
But in any case, they've been moved on, told to move somewhere where some other local government is going to tell them to move on. So it's not really much of a solution. Obviously, I guess this links to that rising cost of living that we just said. This isn't a problem that a local government can handle. It needs to be something that's tackled much more broadly. Thankfully, no local gov seems to have actually given anyone a fine for either refusing a move-on notice or just has given an on-the-spot fine, which they can do for people who are overstaying a parking spot, basically, or for rough sleeping,
loitering,
because you can just straight up do that. So it seems to me like the local government in Scarborough and the Freo area, and the Coburn area as well, it seems like they're not wanting to be dicks about it. But they also, with the tourist season ramping up in the beaches, they don't want people camping around there, which, I can't agree with. Maybe just let them stay there and the tourists can just enjoy, the Freo beach. Yeah. It's part of the experience, guys.
No, that's exactly where I go. And this is part of the fucking character of the goddamn beach. Let the people. I'm not an anarchist anymore, but I just think there should be anarchy. We should just
anarchy on the beach.
Anarchy on the beach. Let it play out. Let's see what happens. As long as everyone's respectful and respects people's living situations, I think people should be allowed to camp on the beach as long as they're clean.
What's next? They're gonna ban like hula hoops and like fire dances and yoga, like
Or
around
like the
there,
silent
like
discos with the headphones, like
bastards.
far out. Like I mean, we're recording in East Perth right now, and there's a lot of rough sleeping in East Perth, and I see a lot of people get picked up by the cops and moved on, and this sort of stuff. Like people sleeping in shop windows and stuff, like just on the outside. So like this is a general crisis of capitalism.
Yeah.
This is people being forced out onto like the absolute bones of their ass, and they're being penalised for it because of the system of profit for landlords and housing, you know? And that's the way I see it, at least.
No, 100%. I mean, when you're going to commodify housing and when there is a limited amount of labor to build those houses, a limited amount of desirable land, you know, there's only so far people want to start moving out to, you're going to have a rise in that land's cost. Like you can't just trade it as a commodity. Those prices are going to keep going up and up and up and up. And that's the general trend we've been seeing. People, of course, can no longer continue to afford this, and they're turning to other means or being forced, you know, for other means. It's not always a choice, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a bit shit.
I mean, I was looking on LinkedIn, and there was this one organization that helps people who are sleeping rough. I forget the name of the organization. We can put it in the description of the video. And they were saying that Airbnbs number about 9,000 properties in Australia, or maybe WA, I can't remember. But only 2,000 of those properties are actually at the moment available for leasing and rent. You know, as a commercial, as a residential lease. So that's crazy. Airbnb is actually forcing up the price of these houses. So this sort of like air economy or cloud economy that we're trying to build is actually just another form of landlordism and rent seeking.
Yeah, I mean, Airbnbs, I guess that short-term accommodation is definitely a factor. But yeah, it's all just linked to that profit seeking. Like when whether Airbnb stopped existing for whatever reason, we're still going to be seeing these issues as people, whether they're just a retiree or a bank buying up properties to then be used as a way of rent seeking. Like you're just going to start seeing these problems.
Just an upward transfer of wealth, basically. Yeah.
With one of the obvious cost in rise in living in the past, 3 years, or I guess dramatic increase in the rate at which the cost of living has been increasing. I forgot to note the name of the service. Again, we'll also link that in the description. But there's been, compared to the first 6 months of last year, the first 6 months of 2023 this year have had a 55% increase in people accessing services for rough sleepers or homeless people.
That's
55%, which is like...
That's a crisis.
It way too many people are simply not able to cope with this. But that's also as intended with these interest rates. Like that is the economic intention, like is to siphon off a bunch of extra cash to slow down that inflation, squeeze that money supply a bit. And if the unintended consequence of that, intended consequence of that is people stop having so much money to spend on rent that they have to go homeless, well then awesome. They've limited the money supply in the economy. That's as intended. That's the system working as
the pie being
it has to it has to actually happen in order for this economic system to work.
This is normal. For profit to increase, you have to increase the reserve army of homeless and labor, of unemployed labor.
Yeah, or even just to be maintained.
Yeah, just to maintain the rate of profit, it has to increase anyway. Like it's just ridiculous. We need to end the landlord class.
So yeah, well, I forget the name of the service, but there is a great volunteer service going on in the Rio and Coburn area that you can get involved in. I'll link it in the descriptions. Apologies for forgetting the term. That is helping to connect to rough sleepers or homeless people or whatever term you wish to use, and get them in contact with services, whether that be getting in to the unfortunately long waiting list for government housing, getting them into contact with services which can provide food and clothing and whatever other things they may need. I know they also run cleaning and showering services in one of their facilities, for example, for people who would otherwise not have access to these things. So I'll link that. Again, apologies for forgetting their name.
Because I know there's Tranbies down here. I know there's
okay,
Tranbies down here near the Socialist Alliance Party office, or the Buller Activist Centre, otherwise known.
Which is at next to McIver Station as well.
It's next to McIver Station, yeah. So there's showers there. You can get a feed.
Yeah. So thankfully those services do exist, but yeah,
it's a band-aid solution.
Yeah.
We need people in stable, long-term housing in order to make sure they can flourish.
Yeah. But I guess more immediately, if you're wanting to help assist and get people in contact with these services, because a big issue, if you weren't aware, is when people find themselves in this situation, unexpectedly homeless, which I guess is probably most of the time. You're not aware of these services because you've never thought about it. You're probably not been someone who's been thinking about the homeless issue. You might be aware of it, but you've never bothered to look into that. So you're not aware of these services. No. So getting people in contact with these is a huge help, helping to prepare meals, helping to fundraise, etc., etc. More hands are always needed for this endless work under the system. So please check out the description for the group, which I forgot the name of.
Yeah, well, we'll stick a whole bunch of links in there. Yeah, whatever we made reference to, I suppose we can do it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think then we can move on from what's going on in Western Australia and move on to what's going on in Australia.
Nationally, yeah, sure.
Awesome. Okay. So, Dan Andrews resigns.
Shock horror.
Another domino. It's weird.
Yeah.
Is this like, are they all just facing emotional burnout, or is this just like, is this an intentional thing by the Labor Party? What do you think? I guess more before we get to that, I guess what's your response, Blair? To
my
Dan
response
Andrews'
is
resignation?
it's much easier to be a bank executive or mining company consultant than it is to be, let's say, the executive part of Parliament. So the Prime Minister or the Premier in these parliaments is the executive, as you know. And the executive is inside the legislature in a Westminster system, like the one that we have, regardless of the fact that we have, sort of like independent judiciaries and that sort of stuff that doesn't exist in the official Westminster system. But I think the pressure of trying to negotiate between capitalists and trying to fix some sort of movement on any issue is very difficult when you're a premier. And so I think the job itself is not hard, I don't think it's hard to be a premier because you've got a whole suite of bureaucrats underneath you who kind of just do the work for you, and you kind of just say, I want this to happen, and they do the job for you. So I think it's just easier to be a capitalist than to be a politician. And I think they'd much prefer to be richer than they would to be, say, someone who has the veneer of trying to be a democratic governor.
Yeah, we're referencing Mark McGowan for those who don't know who started working. Was it Rio Tinto or was it Woodside?
He's gone to BHP.
BHP, okay, yeah. He after saying he is, to be completely honest, I'm exhausted, or something along those lines.
Nothing in the tank or something. Or maybe that was Jacinta Ardern.
No, it was McGowan. Wait, what?
Bruce, he said, I got nothing in the tank.
Oh, okay.
But that might have been another Labor, the Labor Prime Minister of New Zealand did the same thing as well.
That was her, I think. That was her instead, but McGowan did have a similar line. But in any case, he's then gone on to work for BHP. Dan Andrews, are we expecting the same thing? I mean,
I think there's the exact same response, which is I'm burnt out, I've had enough, I think I'd rather be rich and have an easy job. I think that's what they say. I think that's what they honestly believe in their heart of hearts.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily think this is a purpose or intentional series of step downs promoted by the federal Labor Party, which some people are discussing as a potential source to get rid of these COVID lockdown premiers or faces.
I don't know.
And then have someone who's the public who haven't associated these things, because
my genuine feeling is that these people are lazy. Just lazy. In fact, think about it. You and I are on the streets all the time, organising as activists.
I mean,
we live and breathe this, you and me, and like,
look, I don't want to take
we would
credit.
do anything to get into Parliament or affect some political change through some democratic body.
Okay, maybe why are we doing this then? Because we could just join the Labour Party. You're right, Blair. We should do that. That is a good point. We'll be much more effective there.
Not in the Labour Party, obviously, but like you and I would jump at the chance to do any effective change as a minister.
100%. Look, okay, maybe I don't 100% agree about them being lazy. The job seems pretty stressful and busy, even if you're getting a lot of lackeys to do sort of the grind, in terms of media scrutiny and public expectations. Well, then you'd make it great. You should just join the Liberal Party because,
join the Liberal Party. Ooh.
I think you'd do very well with that attitude. But in any case, it doesn't seem like you think this is a intentional
I don't think there's any machinations
by the
behind this,
by
to
the
be
Federal
honest.
Labour Party. No,
I mean, he had a pretty tough run, and he was a real disciplinarian for the COVID stuff. But then again, they were over east. Remember, we had a much easier time here in WA, and we actually had sort of a referendum on COVID and the way it was being dealt with Mark McGowan, and we ended up with the two houses of Parliament. Being a facsimile for him.
His actions.
No, but give me your take though. I'm interested to know if it is machinations within the Labor Party to sort of get people in who don't have this legacy of like hatred against them because of COVID. What's the game plan there? What would you say if that's your take?
Look, I don't necessarily know if it's true, but I don't think it is out of this world. The fact that McGowan has jumped to another job with BHP so quickly after saying he's burnt out. This man has been a career politician for a long. He was one of the longest serving
leaders of the Labor Party in WA.
Yeah, he was he's been around since the early 90s, I think. But then again, COVID, it was a crazy time. I imagine the stress they put under has been genuinely horrific. So
I hope their heart was in the right place then.
But in any case, I wouldn't be surprised if the Labour Party federally has gone, all right, we want to keep the Labour Party's current popularity, but we want to give a well enough time before the federal election
for these people to settle in.
Where we get them settled in, everything's running smoothly right now after COVID, let's go with it. But they don't want the sort of hot topic button ready for the opposition to go, especially with Dan Andrews. But think about all the trauma, because genuinely, think about how many people would have been locked in their apartments. Not saying it wasn't the right decision to save lives, but the emotional stress or trauma that it was difficult. It was difficult for all of us, but especially I really do feel for those in Melbourne who were locked down for extended periods of time, and I think is a big source of why you saw so many cookers emerge.
Oh yeah, the anti-vaxxer movement I'm not a fan of.
I do think some people's brains would have snapped in that kind of situation. So it definitely removing him.
I can see the succession plan argument actually, because what happens after Dan Andrews? Is it just Dan Andrews for the next 10 years or something? Is that
he's already been? That's the thing. He's already been around for so long. He has. Maybe
it is time for him to roll over and go join a bank then.
He's done his time. He's been a polarizing figure. Labour Party there is still popular and polling well, it seems. Before the media machine starts cranking out everything and really spinning, which it has started to do with this COVID inquiry, which we'll get to, for better or for worse, or whether or not the critiques are valid or not.
It's good to consider.
I don't think this is crackpot, is what I'm saying.
I don't think it's crackpot. I just think the simplest solution is always the correct one. The simplest solution for me is, time to hang up my hat. Time to live out the rest of my years. I did a long stint, and I'm lazy. I just want a lazy life.
Although I think it's plausible that emotional burnout would be a factor, I don't think both of these guys have been in the game for so long that the idea that they've just decided to leave halfway through is just a bit odd to me. But one last factoid about this. Dan Andrews. Turns out there's a rule or a law or whatever you want to call it. In order to get a statue commissioned by whether it's a federal or a state thing, to get a statue to commemorate you as a premier or a minister or whatever, you need to be in the job for 3,000 days.
Okay, and has he?
He did earlier this year.
Oh, there you go. Statue for
Just a
Dan
little
Andrews.
fun factoid.
I don't know what it's going to look like. Kim Jong-un? Kim Jong-un's level statue?
Depends who they get to
That'd be hilarious.
commission to make the thing, I guess.
Out of bronze? Probably out of
Big
bronze.
bronze statue, 20 feet tall. Put it like...
Sweeping overcoat.
Have you been to Melbourne?
Yeah, I've been to Melbourne
Yeah,
a few
have you
times.
been to that like inside shopping centre with
The one
big
with the
dome?
shot making
It's
one?
got the tower
with the
inside.
tower, yeah, I know that one, yeah.
Knock that tower down. Put a giant statue of Dan Andrews.
Dan
there.
Andrews, yeah, I'm all for it.
And then when lockdown happens, if no one wants to be in an apartment alone, stuff him into that building.
And they can be alone
And then
with
they
Dan
can
Andrews.
see over Dan Andrews, and you can start like a Fallout New Vegas cult and whatever.
I love it.
Whatever. Anyway, moving on. I think is there anything because one more thing actually on Australian politics. The COVID inquiry has been stirring up a bit of controversy. Have you? The federal government has announced a COVID inquiry, not on the level of a royal inquiry, like
commission
they did,
or something,
commission,
yeah.
sorry, like they have done with the Disability Commission, which just came out today.
I was watching some of Jordan Steele John's comments on it as well, yeah.
But it's not on that level, which has some extra powers, but it's sort of like a step below that, where they've still given them some powers to call witnesses and to compel some states to share information. But the real controversy is that they have explicitly limited this inquiry to not cover unilateral action taken by the state and federal gov, which means that state actions alone, specifically the closed borders, I think the vaccine mandates,
Well, the general state of emergency powers that they might have,
are not going to be included, which is kind of weird. The argument that the opposition is making, and I leaning to agreeing, is that they don't want, again, any of this hot topic being brought up in this inquiry. So why make this inquiry at all, you may ask, then, if they don't want all of this controversial stuff being brought up when they're worried about the next election? Is because who was in charge federally?
ScoMo. ScoMo and what's his face, Frydenberg.
Yeah, so do we remember what the fuck was going on there?
Oh, it was ridiculous.
When COVID happened, ScoMo forgot to return a call, forgot to send some emails. We missed out on like a whole bunch of vaccines for how long was that? 5-month delay or something like that?
Did you know that UQ actually developed an Australian vaccine and then we just flushed it down the toilet? We destroyed all that vaccine because it was considered that the HIV stem of the virus that we were using as a vector to like help people move the virus into your body was considered to be like bad optics for the media. It'd be like, am I being given HIV? And all the scientists were like, no, we're just using part of the HIV virus that's been deactivated to help deal with the coronavirus.
It's got some juice.
My take on it was we had an Australian option. It may whether or not it was I think it was a good
efficacious,
one. It was efficacious, and we threw it away because ScoMo was like HIV. No way. Yeah, okay. So that's just one example of the corruption associated with this system of bullshit. Yeah. And then there was the as I was saying to you earlier, the auto translation that they used with computers. They didn't even get proper translators in to translate the different educational documents into different languages.
So they were like me in high school doing Italian, and they just put it in Google Translate.
Pretty much what they did. That's the level of idiocy that the Liberal Party federally was practicing.
So in any case, we're not obviously the good old ScoMo did major fuck ups in that period of time.
Huge mismanagement.
It seems that the federal Labor Party wants to focus on in this inquiry as like the argument for not focusing on state actions is that those states have already done their own inquiries Therefore, this inquiry can look at those findings and incorporate it. This is not a full royal commission, so they don't need to go do all their own research. They don't need the same level of powers because we want this done in a year, not 4.
I think we should let this play out. Actually,
So
we should let this play out.
it's a bit sus. It's a little bit sus that they would explicitly limit it.
Of course,
to
they're trying to cover their
things
ass.
That
Of course,
the state
that's
and
what
federal
governments do.
government
Governments
did
try and
in
cover their
tandem
ass.
rather than what the states did independently. Like, it's weird.
Yeah,
So
I see what you mean. Yeah. I mean, it's for me, it's not surprising but disappointing.
yeah,
You know, like governments are always trying to cover their ass when they make a big mistake, especially when it's the opposite party in our two-party system. They want to score as massive points as they can off the other one, and naturally, like they want to cover up all the shit that they did wrong, and they don't want to have a proper look at it like they should. And if we let it play out, maybe we will have a royal commission into the COVID mismanagement, and I hope we do.
you know, and obviously, I think anyone who believes COVID was a thing and wasn't a conspiracy, anyone who rightly has that position, obviously sees how the Liberal Party was far more ineffective throughout this whole period, and the Labor Party was the only effective
Absolutely.
ones.
Look at
But
Gladys
but
Berejiklian and
to
the
then
goddamn
use-
Ruby Princess.
But then
like-
to seemingly be using this to score like political brownie points, and use it as a way to spin against them for the next election. I'm hoping that's not the case, but that's what it's seeming like.
That's what I see, at least.
It's just shit. Like, we're meant to be using everything we've learned here to stop another goddamn pandemic or epidemic
Yeah.
within Australia.
Yeah.
And it just seemingly being spun like this by both political parties, of course. It's not like Labor's the only one.
Welcome to politics, Caleb.
Yeah. Whatever.
There's a lot of spin.
Yeah, real politic. Whatever. I hate it. It's great. Helping people, no. That's secondary to winning.
Helping people like flourish and manage their own lives and practice freedom. No.
Die from a virus. No.
We're here to protect business here.
We're gonna win the next election. So, but anyway, anything else in this?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah,
we covered
I know.
it pretty well. It's pretty good.
Let's pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah,
I think we did well.
Yeah. And by the way, whenever you make a point that I agree with, everyone should know that I'm vigorously nodding. Yeah. And when you say something I absolutely hate, I'm like shaking my head so much. You can't see that, but like if there was a video,
there's no
thankfully.
shaking happening ever. All right, moving on.
The people we don't like.
Moving on to the world at large, we've got the writers' strike happening in the US of A.
Yeah.
It's been going on for 146 days, and it's just been announced on Sunday the 24th that they have reached an agreement.
Well, the WGA has. I'm not about.
Sorry,
I'm
the
not-
writers, not the actors. Yeah.
Yeah, not SAG-AFTRA. SAG-AFTRA? Is that the actors one? But anyway, the WGA, the Writers Guild, they won. They won their demands.
They got it.
That's what you need to do. Go out, get on strike, do it in your workplace. That's the only way to make your wages go up. The bosses will never, ever, ever give you a pay rise if you ask for it nicely. That's the rules.
No, so this has obviously been a huge success. 146 days. I just can't even imagine like what has gone into keeping it going for that long. Because obviously, if you're not working, you're not making any money. I'd really love to know exactly how the hell they've done this, whether or not there's been some top dog benefactors helping everyone out, or whatever exactly how this works. If the union has been saving up this money for this long to keep everyone afloat. But in any case, they have won. So some of the big points I saw was some AI protections, because obviously the strike happened shortly after ChatGPT exploded into the scene and started scaring everyone. Thankfully, it doesn't seem to be as effective right now anyway, as people were concerned. You okay there, Blair?
No, I'm good. I'm just having a bit of a burp.
Right.
Don't worry about me. Cut that out.
No, that's fine. I don't think you did. But if you do, oh, nice. But those AI protections are part of the agreement, not to be used in rewriting material or just sort of...
Yeah.
And whenever it is used, it needs to be obviously sort of...
Probably flagged.
or flagged, whatever term. A big problem or concern of writers was the lack of royalties. There's some other term, I think, for the writers. Obviously, when you had traditional TV, if a show is re-aired, you
Syndication,
had... Yeah, is that the term when you get like a percentage from whenever it's re-aired later
So it'd
on?
be royalties from syndication.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
You got a percentage from that. However, obviously, those agreements didn't simply transfer over to when things like Netflix and Disney Plus
Exactly.
and whatever else came on. So that big source of consistent income has just disappeared, which writers were dependent on, because otherwise you're basically jumping from job to job, writing stuff as quickly as possible, scrambling to make sure you can get that paycheck. However, there's royalties coming through. You can more reliably have some source of income coming in.
It's about like control of production as well, and making sure that people can exercise proper creative control over some idea or some show. And that's the way those royalties will work as well. Because if you're making sure that you still have some sort of interest in that property, so let's say intellectual property, if you want to call it, that allows the writers to be more democratic in the way that they can exercise their creative control. That's the way I see it, at least.
Yeah, well, being economically secure, they're not being such a rat race.
Exactly.
There's going to be less the race at the bottom. So I hope this will, and I'd be willing to bet, has a positive impact on writing quality.
I think it's a huge
in
win.
Hollywood at large.
Very positive news.
So just to jump back to that royalty agreement, they got a 50% bonus when watched by 1/5 or more of domestic subscribers of the streaming platform, which is a bit of an odd metric, but like,
Could happen.
I guess you got to pick one.
They do a big show, big pay.
I would have thought something that it would have just been a general royalty from the streaming, but I guess they've got to, they wouldn't have just been to get that from the streaming services. So they've probably got some...
Could be some
They
schmooze.
got to reach some metric
Yeah.
that you got to pass before you just start getting this constant stream of income, however small. But whatever, it is a positive, and they've got a large pay increase in general. If you want to look at that, just have a quick Google, or maybe link an article just to see, because the details are only coming out because even though they announced they reached an agreement, they hadn't released everything that had been won yet.
Yeah.
The union is still yet to vote as of last night anyway, on the 28th of the 9th, 2023. So we don't know the full details yet, but they just announced some of the details, and yeah.
I'm really happy.
So yeah, that's awesome. Actors Guild still on strike. We'll see how that goes. This should give them a bunch of wind though, and should hopefully
totally.
force the negotiations and get them.
I want to see these studios bleed. Hollywood's full of money.
Yeah, no, I mean these insane multi-million-dollar productions happening with like just endless stream of Marvel movies, just this Netflix series garbage that's being pumped out.
My
and,
eyes are
people
rolling.
aren't even being paid royalties, like over stuff they wrote last year. You get like a $2,000 thing to help write a couple episodes, which will take a couple weeks to do, and then you might not get any work for another month because it's such a rat race. And
bit work.
It's just insane. So anyway, good on them. Awesome to see. Moving on more worldwide, I just realized that we skipped over what you wanted to talk about, Blair, in Australia with the AMWU and
the United Workers Union as well.
Well, let's go back to that, and then we'll move on with worldwide news.
Because this is good. This is good because it is related to workers' struggle. So I know a whole bunch of my comrades. I wasn't able to get out there because I've been doing renovations at the Boolaloo Activist Centre lately. But a whole bunch of my comrades have been out on the picket line in Osborne Park for 5 days. And having been out for 5 days, they won 13 point something percent.
So do you want to... What industry was this?
Okay, so this is chicken processing. This is like Ingham's. So Ingham's chickens, they make nuggets. They make all of the chicken food for KFC, especially with the grand final for AFL coming up. They would have been able to really squeeze profit losses out of the bosses with this strike, given the way it's timed. But because the picket was so strong and because the workers were so resolute, they won 5.12% in the first year, which sort of matches inflation. I mean, then 4% for the next 2 years for each year as well. So that's 13 point something percent over 3 years. They voted for it, so they're happy with it. I'm happy with it because they're happy with it. They originally wanted 6% each year for those 3 years, so they wanted 18%. But to get 13% is a pretty good precedent, to be honest. And these workers are the salt of the earth. These workers are just decent people.
Is salt of the earth not a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing.
that a
It
good
means they're
thing?
just decent, honest, civil people.
Okay, I always thought of salt of the earth as like terrible because when you salt a field, it just kills it forever.
No, salt of the earth is a good thing in this
sure.
case. Salt of the earth, it means like just a humble, decent person who just wants to eke out an existence.
Okay.
And these people are like a lot of migrant workers. A lot of people have immigrated to Australia as well. So it's actually a really good way to show people the democratic process inside a workplace.
I did see that this is an industry that is one of the lowest paid in all of Australia. So this is great to see that they're getting organized, they're taking action. They are, whatever you may think or feel about the animal agriculture industry, however many problems it does have, it is great to see that workers are able to come together, because only by coming together and in this struggle that we're actually going to be able to take collective action and change the system, whether that's more immediate economic goals like this in order to just survive, and ideally to progress past surviving and actually helping to build a better world where all those lovely little chickens aren't turn into nuggets.
No, absolutely. My plan for the future, hopefully, is to make sure that we don't have, let's say, unecological animal agriculture. But there is the problem of, animal consciousness and, the sanctity of life that is, snuffed out when you kill chickens and beef and lamb and goats and that sort of stuff. But the only way we're going to be able to get to a vegan society is through the workers, I think. The workers themselves are going to be the ones that lead the charge, like with just transitions in the energy industry. It's the unions and the workers that are going to be driving us towards this much more ecological and democratic and civil society. That's the way I see it, at least. You're not going to be seeing veganism led by the bosses. I don't want to see it that way anyway, to be honest. I used to be a vegan for a long time. I'm not a vegan now. But the only way we're going to get a proper democratic society is through workers' control. That's the way I see it, at least.
100%. I mean, the only reason the animal agriculture industry exists at this scale is because it is so profitable.
Profit.
Like you back before, I mean, obviously with technological innovations and whatever else, it's made this kind of practice easier, but none of these things would have been developed to the scale that they have been and to such horrific levels if it weren't for that profit seeking. So again, it all comes back to money and making money and squeezing profit. And,
just number go up.
Outcompete the other guy. Let's torture those chickens. Put 3 in a cage. That's genius.
Just make them lose their feathers and shit. Feed them lots of antibiotics. It's fucked.
Yeah. So whatever. Yeah. Good on the guys for winning.
This is huge. This is huge. This United Workers Union win is fucking huge, and I think it's really, really good. I've had multiple of my comrades say to me, "This has been," and like for instance, Nova. Shout out to Nova. How you going, comrade? Nova said to me that this was like an activist career-defining moment for them.
Really?
Being on the picket line. This was a really big event. I feel really, like a bit of chagrin in myself for not going down there and, saying hi and schmoozing with the workers and all that stuff. But I know that the bigger workers in the dairy plants over east are now on strike.
Okay.
With the same union.
Awesome.
With the AMWU and the UWE.
I saw that they've been the AMWU, the Australian
Metal
Workers Union, has been helping out strikes all over the country.
They're a really good union. I like
awesome. So if you're a metal worker or just someone wanting to help out with this kind of industrial action, check out those guys.
Follow their Facebook or their Instagram or go to their website. Websites are good as well. Or just ring them up and be like, "What strikes are on, mate? I want to turn up." They got a phone. They got a phone number.
No, they seem to be involved in a proper lot of picket lines, like in industries that aren't completely in line with theirs. Or
this is a new generation
but they're
of people learning how
they're
to
helping to link up and collaborate and push other industries striking action forward, which is awesome to see. All right, cool. Anything else on this then?
No, I just want to see more of it. I hope we see a strike wave.
That'd be nice.
I hope we see a wages price spiral for once. instead of a profit price spiral, which is what we've been seeing with this inflation.
Really
Let's see the workers' wages go up.
I mean, we'll see how that impacts this broader economic system, but whatever. Don't again.
Can only be good.
How this goddamn system hates all of that.
Decent average people.
Anyway, moving back onto the worldwide, we have the UAW, or the United Auto Workers Union, in the US of A, who have been on strike. You may have seen Biden, the first president ever to join a picket line.
Yeah.
Which is interesting even in itself. I obviously will get to the real politicking aspect of that in a moment, but this strike is pretty awesome. Currently, as of yesterday, I saw that 18,300 roughly workers were on strike, which is 12.5% of the members of the union whose contracts ended September 14th. This is a huge union, because this isn't even all the workers whose contracts haven't expired. So this is a massive union, and they're taking a pretty cool strategy or tactic in regards to trying to fight for better conditions. So this is all over, I think, the New England area. Maybe I'm completely wrong there. But there's factory plants all over the region that are being organized by this union. A lot of them aren't striking. And the way they're doing it is by playing different automakers against each other. So if an automaker, which for Ford example, apparently is making good progress in the negotiations, so they're not expanding any of the strikes at those plants. However, at plants that are not negotiating, not playing ball, they're expanding the strikes at those plants, which is genius. And I love that they're at a scale, this union, to be able to play that kind of tactic, because they're going like, Ford's playing ball, we did one strike, and now
do this stuff yourself in Australia.
Why don't you do this, guys? So that's great to see. Really love it. Seems like that's making good progress with this and the writers' strike making a win. There seems to be a really strong wave of strikes happening across the US that are being far more successful than the rail strike, which I want to come back to in just a moment when we start talking about Biden being there on the picket line. But before that, any thoughts, Blair?
I'll just jump straight to the real politic. I think it's just workers' power forcing the president's hand.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I see it. In fact, I watch a lot of Bernie Sanders on this topic of like the auto workers. And I know a bit of the history of the UAW as well. So the UAW was heavily involved in the civil rights movement as well. I'm not sure how linked they were to the Communist Party, but they've definitely been one of the more left-wing and progressive and activist type unions in America. And that's because they, understand rightly that the economy does use cars and we want. I know
we love cars. We love cars.
But the point is, if you are making cars or making some product in your workplace, you should have some hope of being able to buy that thing that you're producing. Can you imagine being immiserated making these huge General Autos or Fords or General Motors, or Fords or Toyotas or whatever they make in the US, but not being able to afford one. They're these shiny cars, and you're just being like, I have no hope of ever being able to access this.
It'd be a bit sad.
That'd be awful. So these people deserve a living wage, like these, and they're fighting for it, and they're going to get it.
Yeah, no,
I reckon they're going to get it.
They seem to be doing pretty well. But on the real politicking aspect, maybe I misunderstood, but in terms of workers forcing Biden's hand, I'm not sure if I completely agree with that. I think this is a bit of a smart political spin by Biden, because if we remember how I just mentioned the rail strike that happened, do you remember what happened with that? That wasn't very successful from memory.
Well, it's complicated. The way it played out was originally a loss, but because of the way that they were treated, they kind of ended up winning in the end anyway, but unofficially. It's sort of hard to understand or to communicate exactly how that worked. Biden did shut it down.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
But they ended up getting their demands under the table.
Okay.
So that's the way it worked. And now that there's these strikes in the auto plants in America, Biden doesn't have another hand to play. He can't sit on top of these auto workers in the same way that he did the train workers, because all bedlam will break out, basically. This is like one core aspect of the US economy that he can't ignore. He needs these votes for the election coming up for the Democratic Party, whether or not he's the candidate. If they'd run him for the candidate again, I don't know why they would ever do that. He's so old. But like, seriously, have you seen the gaffes and stuff lately? But like,
I mean, like
compared to Trump's gaffes.
they're all old, man. Like, there's no one there that's like. In any case, we won't get into that. The goddamn
The oldness of the white men.
just all of them. Like, it's
But
insane.
my point is he can't have a repetition of what he did to the rail workers.
No, like
This time he has to join them on the picket line in order to save face.
I guess
that's the way I see it.
Potentially, yeah. So I guess with him talking about, for example, the rail strike, he said it's simply too important of an industry to be stopped. We can't let it happen. I think it odd that you wouldn't just play the same argument with the this striking action, but maybe the union's much larger. There'd be a much larger group of the population to defend. But I think what is more of a factor, or what I'm inclined to think is more of a factor, is the fact that the day Biden arrived to join the picket line was the day before Trump was meant to arrive.
Yeah,
and see
it's
the
all
workers.
about getting there first.
So the day before, like Trump announced that he was going first.
Yeah.
Biden was like, I'm going the day before you. And he planned that after Trump, which I think is so hilarious that that they're playing like that. Like, no, I'm going a day before you. You know,
I want to see the working class curry favor with these autocrats. Like, not curry favor, but like dominate them and get them to listen to their demands. Like, the fact that Biden wants to gazump Trump on this shows the strength of the working class in this respect. Like, not their pattern bargaining, but their pattern striking, which is something that we've been exploring in Australia for a while. Like, pattern bargaining works in terms of protected actions here as well, is working. Yeah. This method of striking is working. Not only is it causing the president to have to bend his knee to them, this is the way I see it at least, that it's good. This is a good thing. I want to see Biden gazump Trump on the working class question. I want to see the Democrats get more favor from the working class instead of the Trump.
I hope they all start trying to kiss the union's ass and try and
I want to see it happen.
outdo one another. That would be great.
It has to happen.
But I think with how split the vote is among this sort of industrial working class segment of the population in the United States between the Democrat and the Republican Party, it being a fairly polarized and, you know, even leaning towards Trump in many in
the Rust Belt at least.
I'm not sure how
this
that is in the automotive industry, but Trump is definitely hugely popular. So this is, I think, is another huge factor in Biden. Rather than trying to appease the oligarchs and those with the economic interests up top, and trying to win the media spectacle and whatever else through that means, he's playing it, I guess, closer to the ground because he knows.
I like that.
You know, it in this circumstance, the number of votes he would win by actually joining the picket line is more than he would win through the media spectacle.
We're trying to stitch up Trump,
being able to aid the oligarchs and whatever they would then help him out, make sure he
absolutely, yeah.
So I think this is a purely pragmatic. It's not like he's
it's purely pragmatic, but I do want to see some pragmatic populism.
Yeah, no, I want to see that. I mean, that's, I guess, the beauty of this collective action is that it doesn't matter what the president is, if by doing the real politic, it doesn't matter who's up top because they can just make it happen. Now, I mean, I guess that's not quite true because if you had someone like Reagan and he would Thatcher, those kinds of figures, then I guess, you can take a much more aggressive approach to these kinds of union actions. But thankfully, Biden's not that guy. And these kinds of actions can be effective.
Yeah. It's a famous quote from Marx: "When equal rights collide, force decides."
Yeah.
And so by exercising their power and using their force, the working class will get the satisfaction that it deserves.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty damn good way to summarize it. I like that. Yeah, I guess that's
We've done pretty well.
That was all of the content that I
Awesome.
have so far planned. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Blair?
How long's a piece of string? I think one action that I did recently was against Channel 7, and that was against their really transphobic documentary that they ran on Spotlight or news piece or whatever you want to call it. And I was actually out picketing Channel 7 a couple of weeks ago with a whole bunch of my trans comrades, and it's actually taken off. There's people now doing it over East. So it's really cool to see that like people who want a democratic and open society can take action, on a bit of a short notice.
Okay.
But that was just one thing I did recently.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. Because I've been out of the country for the past couple of months, so I haven't really been keeping in touch with what's been going on closer to the ground. Yeah. Is this an ongoing thing that you can get involved in?
It is ongoing. So if you're in Perth, in WA, join Queer Liberation Boorloo if you're queer.
And if you're not queer,
you can be an ally. You can be an ally. No, but these people again, salt of the earth. These people are beautiful, beautiful people that I will always support. I've always been there for my trans sisters and brothers.
I don't know if that's the right use of that expression.
Do you want me to look it up right
now?
No,
it's fine.
Do you want me to do
I'll let the public decide. Okay, I'll let our 3 listeners decide.
I'm going on my phone right now. I have to pull this up. But anyway, maybe we'll wind down. I don't know.
Because like salt of the earth, it's like the Persians have come in, they burn our fields, they killed our people, and they fucking put salt there as well. Like they couldn't just kill us; they had to like destroy our agricultural ability for hundreds of years. Because you don't want salt in the soil.
So it comes from actually the Matthew. It's like the Sermon on the Mount thing. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt had lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anyone except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. Hold on.
It doesn't sound good.
The positivity towards salt in this phrase conflicts with many other uses of the word salt, which has also been used to express negative concepts. For example, in the Middle Ages, salt was used to poison the earth. So it actually does mean you are the.
But it said it's controversial because it can mean both. It does mean both.
Maybe it has the way I intended it.
Yeah. Okay. So if there's someone that you want to insult, I guess, but you can't say openly, just call them salt of the earth.
No, I don't mean to insult them. I want to praise them.
Or if you're fine, if there's someone you want to praise but everyone else hates, then you say that as well. Either way, you got plausible deniability.
Exactly.
So yeah,
cool beans.
Thank you, everyone.
Don't forget to share this podcast with everyone that you think would find it interesting. We're going to try and make more.
Yeah, I'm hoping every 2 weeks. Ideally, might be happening every 3. Otherwise, on the slow points. But otherwise,
left in Perth. Just
left in Perth. Thank God.
But not left behind. Not left behind.
Not left behind.
Just left here.
Just left here.
Just left in Perth.
Yeah. In any case, call to action. Please check out the goddamn Disrupt Burrup Hub.
Check out the goddamn
screw the Scarborough Gas expansion project. They're trying to kill whales. I love the whales. They are trying to destroy this planet with more greenhouse gases. Please check out the homeless person assistance group operating in the Fremantle and Coburn area in the description.
Check out Tranby House, St. Patrick's, Uniting Church. I have some qualms about church groups, but they
do a lot of good work. And
there's a lot
on that front.
I mean, there's even soup kitchens that get run informally by some of my comrades, like Cody Jensen, who's a CFMEU organizer. Yeah, and he does a soup kitchen down in Freo.
Oh, awesome. Okay, that's good to hear. That's happening.
A food kitchen, yeah. So that happens on Sundays every now and then.
Okay, cool. Is there a Facebook or Instagram page that people can check out to get involved in that?
I'll ask him for something.
All right, we'll put something else in the link down below, and of course, please submit your design proposals for the Dan Andrews statue.
Yes, I want to see that. I want to see that statue. I want to see it as Kim Jong-il as possible. Like hand reaching.
He's got the glasses. Future. You could make it work. Anyway, my name is Caleb.
I'm Blair Vidak.
Thank you for listening. We've been left in Perth. Come and fucking save us.
Yeah.